The book we're talking about is Saifedean Ammous' Bitcoin Standard. There's cracks in this theory that Bitcoin, BTC, can become a new gold standard. Lightning will kill Bitcoin. If you are moving your transactions away from the network, that means there are no fees being generated on that network. Be a man, Saifedean. Don't be a mouse. Your standard needs to have a standard of value, and BTC has none. All right, cool, Kage. We've got another show today.
Mr. G, we do, yo.
We've been at the library.
We've been reading, yo.
We've been reading Bitcoin books from Bitcoin experts, and today we're going to tackle a particular expert.
More like experts, Mr. G.
Yes, get those air quotes rolling. This is the problem in the world with experts. Well, we've got a Bitcoin expert that we're going to be looking at today. His name is Saifedean Ammous. Quite a prominent BTCer.
This book sort of like set the conversation from onset about BTC, you know, so I think it's one of those we actually need to focus on and highlight some of the sort of like misconceptions and contradictions in the book.
That's right. So the book we're talking about is Saifedean Ammous' Bitcoin Standard. Now, of course, he's playing on the whole idea of a gold standard.
Yeah.
In today's world of inflationary fiat currencies, it seems more important than ever to think about money and where it comes from and what gives money value.
Yes.
And so Ammous has created this book called The Bitcoin Standard, where he's showing the world and he's trying to explain how Bitcoin can become a new standard for money. Instead of a gold standard, we've got a Bitcoin standard. The only problem is he's talking about Bitcoin, he's talking about BTC.
Yeah. And we know that is fool's gold.
Yes, so he wants the world to be on a digital fool's gold standard.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't help but go through this book and just point out all the sort of little funny contradictions and things that he says.
So yeah, Ms. G, the Bitcoin Standard, what does the book cover?
It basically wants to take the reader through the whole evolution of money and get to a point where instead of having a gold standard, it's a Bitcoin standard. And to do that, he needs to take the reader on a journey of how money has evolved over the last few millennia. And so he starts off talking about how money started off as seashells and all this sort of thing and needed to become something that was universally recognized, was a medium of exchange.
Yeah.
And so that's really what the first part of the book takes the reader through. What kind of money have we been using in the past, and how did we eventually get to gold and silver being used as money?
Yeah.
He talks about how gold is something that is not inflationary, how it formed the basis of a sound economy. And so this is what the first part of the book, the first couple chapters, goes through. The origins of the money, how people use seashells and all sorts of things like that for money, and then ultimately settled onto gold. It's very important to think about money in terms of properties that's needed for money to be useful. And of course, one of the most important things is a medium of exchange. In other words, if I want to make a payment to you, the way that I pay you mustn't be complicated or difficult. I must be able to easily hand over money to you.
Because essentially cash is peer-to-peer.
Yes, so what I need to do is I need something that is portable, is easily transferable. And if you think about the sorts of things that are valuable, if you think about a cow, for example, that's a very valuable commodity, a cow. But it's not a very good medium of exchange. Because if I want to make a payment to you, then I've got to carry this cow around with me and hand it over to you. I've got to look after it, and then you've got to take it with you as well. And so the sorts of money that developed was the kind of money that was actually a good medium of exchange, something that was convenient, easily transferable. And then another important thing about it is that it must be divisible.
Yes.
And divisibility means that, again, let's take the cow example. If I want to buy something from you that costs half a cow, I can't go and just cut my cow in half and give you the one half, because now I've got another half of a cow that is now, what am I going to do with it?
And the value has already changed there, because what if I want a live cow?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So a cow, it's not good for divisibility because it's very hard to divide a cow into parts.
Definitely, yeah.
Money that can be easily divided, and if you think about something like salt, for example, and apparently the word salary comes from salt.
Yeah.
That's because salt, it's something that's universally valued, portable,
Non-perishable. Yeah.
and it's easily divisible.
Yeah.
If I want to buy something from you that costs half a bag of salt, it's very easy just to go and divide that bag of salt into
And also
two.
universally recognizable. Yeah.
Yes, a very important thing about money is that it must be valued by as many people as possible,
Yes.
so that you can then use it to buy things. And if somebody wants to accept it, then they must know that they can go and use it again somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if you pay me half a bag of salt, I need to know that I can now go and pay somebody else that half a bag of salt. And so, like you say, the sort of universal value
Yeah.
to people. And so we have a divisibility thing, a medium of exchange. Durability, of course, durable means that it can't be something that dies or corrodes or dissolves away.
Perish. It needs to withstand like a period of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
If I get paid in flowers, those flowers aren't going to last for a long time. Something that is good money is something that is durable,
Yeah.
as you say. It lasts a long time. I don't want money that rusts in my pocket, and by the time I want to spend it, it's gone.
Nobody wants that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a very important thing, we've got this divisibility, durability, portability, in other words, a good medium of exchange, something that can be carried with me. There's also another word that is important, is fungibility. And fungibility just means it's interchangeable.
Yes.
And if you think about, let's say, gold coins, if you've got an ounce gold coin and another ounce of gold coin, it doesn't matter if you swap them over. If you've got one and I've got one, we can swap. They're interchangeable.
Same value.
As long as the quantity of gold in those coins is the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter that I have this coin and you've got that coin. They are indistinguishable in a way. And that's what we call fungibility. And so money that is fungible is also a desired quality. That's what you want in money. Mr. Ammous takes us through this whole process of how people developed money, moving away from barter, because with barter, it's very hard to find what's called that coincidence of wants.
Yeah.
If I've got eggs and you've got beef, but you don't want any eggs. I've got to go find somebody who wants my eggs and then can give me something that you want.
Yeah.
That's that idea of the coincidence of wants in bartering. We need to find a way to be able to trade where we both get what we want.
Yeah.
And generally that would require some kind of intermediary. Now with money, it's not like bartering where you are accepting something that you can use right now. What you're accepting is something that is valuable that you can hold until you want to buy something else.
Yeah, and it doesn't lose any value at that point.
Right, that's exactly right. So this is really the process that Saifedean Ammous takes us on. He shows how money developed from bartering. It then went into all these different sorts of things that satisfied one of those properties of money, and takes us on this journey, eventually showing how gold and silver became the most universal money there was. Because if you just think about gold is a very valuable thing in small quantities.
Yes.
It's very easy to divide. If I've got an ounce of gold and I need to pay you half an ounce of gold, well, I can just go and melt that down into 2 half ounces. So it doesn't make the gold less valuable. If you think about diamonds, though, a diamond isn't very good money, because let's say I want to buy something from you that costs half a diamond. If I cut that diamond in half,
Good luck with that.
then suddenly the value isn't just half of what the original value was of that diamond. The value is ruined to a point. And so gold has become this thing over thousands of years that was universally recognized. It was very durable, of course. Gold at the bottom of the ocean can last forever. It's still shiny and beautiful. And it's portable, it's divisible. It's also fungible. If you've got an ounce of gold and I've got an ounce of gold, then it doesn't make a difference. We can swap it. It's interchangeable. That's why we ended up with this gold standard that is described in this book. But of course, he then goes on to show how after World War II and then after 1971, the world went off the gold standard. So in those days, if you had a banknote, then what would happen is, or a dollar, let's just say a dollar, what that dollar represented was a dollar's worth of gold, and a dollar just being a weight of gold.
Even on the note, it's stated that it's you can easily exchange it for gold.
That's right. It's on the notes. It used to say, "I promise to pay the bearer on demand $1."
Yeah.
It wasn't another dollar note. It was $1 worth of gold.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we don't have that standard anymore. The world has gone off that gold standard. And in 1971, famously, Richard Nixon announced that America was going to suspend the gold standard. And now what would happen is that all currency that people would use wouldn't be exchangeable for gold at the bank. It was just what's called a fiat money system.
I think that's where we really lost like true value in money.
Yes, the problem there is that when you have a fiat currency, which is what we have today, which is a paper currency not backed by gold, it means that there's no restraint. Somebody issuing notes in the olden days, if you were a bank and you wanted to issue your bank notes to customers, you would have to have that amount of gold
to back it up
in the bank. And you would say, right, I've got an ounce of gold, I'm going to issue an ounce banknote, okay, whatever that price, whatever the value was. And so the bank couldn't just issue as much as they wanted. They couldn't issue as many banknotes as they wanted.
Out of thin air,
Out of thin air. They had to only issue the amount of banknotes that they had a reserve of gold. And of course, banking then expanded into this idea of fractional reserve, where you don't need to have the full amount of gold in the bank. You just need to have a percentage of that gold in the bank. But still, you need to have some kind of reserve. You need to have some kind of gold. You need to have gold that you can back your notes with. But of course, after 1971, that stopped being the case. And banks are able to now issue notes without having any gold reserves. So this is now the world we live in, where central banks and banks are able to just issue money or issue currency without needing to have any kind of gold that's backing those notes. And we call this the fiat system. And the fiat system really just means by law. The government has said, and all governments around the world have said, that this is the money that you need to use, or I should say currency. These are the notes that you need to use. You have to accept them for payment, and you have to pay your taxes in them. And that is now a legal tender. And so the world now is using a currency system in every single country that is not backed by gold, but is just issued by the monetary authorities. And there is no backing, which means that there is no way to limit the amount of currency that's issued.
I wanted to say, I'm like, okay, if that is the case, then that means there's going to be some form of lack of discipline.
Yes.
When it comes to just managing the entire system. Because if we have so much power, it's easy for us just to run the printer.
That's right. And that is the state of the world we live in. And this is what Ammous is trying to highlight. Is he says that because of this now, because there is no way for banks and central banks to limit how much currency that they create, it's now created an inflationary world where we have currencies that are inflated. And all that means is that more currency is created and more currency is issued out to people without any restraint. This is the inflationary world that we live in today, where when people look at prices going up in the supermarket, which is what everyone's feeling around the world. What the government always says is, well, that's price inflation. We're getting inflation. But actually, where that inflation is coming from is not from the greedy businessman raising his prices or things getting more expensive because they cost more to produce. Really, around the world, what we found over the decades is that things are getting cheaper to produce. You know, as we develop better factories and better ways of cultivating agriculture or mining resources, it's actually the case is that things are getting cheaper. But because of all this inflation that's being created by these central banks, in other words, issuing currencies without any restraint, it means that now the value of those currencies are going down and you need more currency to buy the same goods, which is what we call price inflation.
That's also like the contribution to the debt that people fall into, because, you know, with the inflation there is, we don't have enough money in our pockets, so now we have to borrow.
This is the problem that Ammous is raising. He's saying that when the world went off the gold standard, and we entered into this fiat system, it meant that now inflation could be rampant. And also governments could fund things that they normally couldn't fund.
Yeah.
Normally if a government wants to pay for something, let's say they've got a public works project or they want to go to war or something like that.
Yeah.
Normally what would happen is, back in the gold standard days, is that the government would have to raise that money either by taxing the citizens or by borrowing that money, issuing bonds. Nowadays, what they can do is, without having to raise taxes, which are obviously unpopular, and borrowing money, because eventually, if your government is in debt, then it's harder for that government to borrow more. It's just like a normal person.
Yeah.
If you borrow a lot of money and the bank looks at you and says, you've borrowed so much, I'm not going to let you borrow anymore. But what governments can now do is they can inflate their currencies. And this is what contributes to all these wars, as Ammous says. And so he sees that the world is on a fiat system, which is making the world a worse place. Because now governments have no constraint. They can just go and do whatever they want. They don't have to ask for the citizens' permission. They don't have to raise taxes. They don't have to borrow any more money. All they do is they inflate the currency. And by doing so, they create a stealth tax. In other words, as you were saying, the currency in your pocket doesn't have as much value as it used to have. And so you need more of that currency to pay for the same goods. So essentially what has happened is you're now paying a tax. Because of that loss of value or loss of purchasing power in your currency, you are now having to pay more as a hidden tax for those same goods and services. And so what inflation does is it actually creates a stealth tax.
That's really stealthy,
where the government doesn't have to get permission. They don't have to ask. They don't have to say, all right, citizens, we're now going to be taxing you more because we want to pay for this. The government doesn't have to say anything. They can just say, don't worry, guys, you want this? We've got you covered. How are we going to pay for it? Don't worry about it. We'll sort it out.
That's crazy. That's why the narrative of blaming, whether it's big corporates or stuff like that, that sits well with them, because it doesn't come back to them as the government.
The government doesn't have to now explain, why are things getting more expensive? Where's all this inflation coming from? They will say, it's the prices going up. And don't look at us. We've got nothing to do with this. Go and blame your supermarket or go and blame your dentist, for raising his prices. Don't look at us for things getting more expensive. So governments love inflation.
They do.
Because now they don't have to explain themselves and the blame is shifted over to the actual service providers and the producers. So this is what Ammous is railing against in this book. He says that we can't continue this. If we do this, this world is just going to get worse and worse. Inflation is going to get out of control, as it has around the world many times. Of course, Zimbabwe in 2008 and Venezuela. There's a lot of countries that have gone through inflation or hyperinflation, and that's because governments can go and print that money. So this is all happening in slow motion, if you like. Every country is going through inflation at the moment. And Ammous thinks that if we can just go back to a gold standard, although he will extend that into the Bitcoin standard, then the world would be a better place. But of course, he doesn't stop at gold. He says there's a better solution. And of course, that's what the rest of the book is about.
We're living in the 20th century, man, and we, everything is digital. Money, credit cards, Apple Pay, whatever. Now we have Bitcoin. How is it different, to the current digital payments?
What now the book dives into is why is Bitcoin not just another digital payment system? Like you said, we already use digital money, we use credit cards, online banking, mobile money apps. The world is already digital. But what he wants to show is that even though we use all these digital payment methods, we're still basically using a fiat system. In other words, the currencies that we're using, yes, they're digital, but they're just digital representations of the current fiat system, meaning the non-gold backed money system that governments have enforced on us through fiat, through the law. And he thinks that we're not solving anything. Just because we use these digital money systems, we're still linked to this inflationary fiat system. And of course, that's what then gets us into the whole idea of Bitcoin being scarce, the idea that it's non-inflationary, the idea that there's going to be 21 million Bitcoins, and because it's decentralized, governments can't manipulate it. They can't inflate it arbitrarily. And so he sees that Bitcoin is now the new gold standard, because Bitcoin fulfills all the important features of money, as well as what gold is, this idea of a stable thing that governments can't inflation proof that governments can't manipulate. But he goes further than that, because of course gold we don't know how much gold is in the world, and we don't know how much gold is there to be mined. And also, we don't know if Elon Musk is ever going to bring back a gold asteroid or whatever it is that people say. And so Ammous is now saying that Bitcoin is better because we know 100% what the supply is.
Yeah.
We know that there's going to be 21 million Bitcoins that are ever to exist.
Yeah.
And of course, there's probably a little bit less than that because of all the people who've lost their Bitcoin wallets or something like that.
Yeah.
So he now tries to draw this analogy between Bitcoin and gold. You know, this idea of digital gold.
Yeah.
And a topic that we love harping on.
Yeah, Ms. G, because till today, you know, it's hard for me to just understand the connotation of BTC and gold.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, what he says is that it's scarce, it's decentralized, and so it cannot be manipulated. And it is a good medium of exchange because it's digital. It's divisible. You can take your Bitcoin and you can convert it into Satoshis. It's portable. It's fungible. One Satoshi is the same as every other Satoshi, according to him. He sees that Bitcoin now has become gold perfected. All the messy parts about gold, it ruins environment, mining it.
Yeah.
We don't know how much there is. There could be a big inflation. You know, what if somebody finds a couple megatons worth of gold buried under their backyard? You know, he's like thinking gold is good, but it's not great. And he thinks that Bitcoin is great. Now, what I want to just add, and we haven't really made a distinction here, is that when he is referring to Bitcoin, of course, he's referring to BTC.
BTC.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the idea of BTC, is that it's expensive and all that. Of course, it's gold. You don't want to transact with it. You don't want to use it for cash. You just want to put it in a vault and let it sit there. So this is now his argument. He wants to now show how Bitcoin BTC is the new digital gold for this new era, this new digital era that we're living in.
Yeah.
And he thinks that if only the world can go on to a Bitcoin standard, then all our problems would be solved.
Ms. G, I find it so naive for people to simply compare BTC to gold because, you know, there's a lot of intrinsic value that lies with gold. You know, whether it's jewelry, electronics, dentistry, whatever. But there's some use case to it. Like in the real world, it's not just about putting it in a vault.
Absolutely. I think what they do is they look at gold in a vault and they say, well, that gold's not doing anything. It's now just become an abstract idea where it's not about what you can do with it. It's not about what you can use it for. It's just the fact that it exists and there it sits. So this is probably the big disconnect that digital gold pundits have.
Yeah.
They think that BTC doesn't have to be useful. It doesn't have to have any kind of intrinsic value. The fact that it exists, the fact that it's decentralized and so it cannot be manipulated, and the fact that you can digitally transact with it is enough. That's where they end. And you know, from an economics point of view, but also just from a common sense point of view, you think to yourself, come on, you know, you keep talking about store of value. Where's the value? You know, it's storing something, but it's not value. Value is something that benefits you.
Definitely.
That can be used to enhance your life, improve your life. That's what value is.
Def, Ms. G, that's why these guys need to check out the Centbee wallet if they haven't, because it does add value to your life, yo. Remember to also subscribe, you know, plug your friends, man. More money on fire. You know, there's a very important side that we need to consider, and that's the regulation side of things. Because there's no business without regulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's no adoption.
Nothing.
Yes, exactly. Now, of course, regulation is critical.
Yeah.
And we see around the world how regulators are starting to clamp down on crypto. They are arresting people. Also, they're going after these crypto businesses. They are trying to license these businesses. They call them crypto asset service providers.
Yeah.
And it's very important that businesses who are involved with Bitcoin or crypto become regulated. Now, of course, this is something that the BTC crowd are trying to avoid.
Yeah.
They believe that Bitcoin was created to avoid regulation. They talk about decentralization, where governments can't control Bitcoin or can't stop it or can't confiscate it or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that to them is the most important feature of Bitcoin, is that it cannot be regulated.
Like we were saying previously, they thought it's a cypherpunk too.
That's right. They think that Bitcoin is so dangerous to the government because, it undermines them, or it undermines the currency system that they have.
Yeah.
And so this is the most long-standing trope inside Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin is only valuable if it cannot be controlled and manipulated by governments. And in fact, it's so dangerous to governments that they're going to want to come and clamp down on it, and they're going to want to try and find people who are using it. And so this whole idea of decentralization is what's been blown out of proportion here.
Yeah.
And they think that Satoshi Nakamoto intentionally created a system that was decentralized because it meant that governments couldn't regulate it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, Ammous says that. He says, well, look, regulation isn't a problem because it's decentralized. Governments can't track it down. They can't stop it. And there's nothing they can do about it. And so that is really his argument, when we talk about regulating Bitcoin.
Straight up.
But of course, he overlooks the whole point of people using Bitcoin. They're going to need services, they're going to need apps, and businesses that are accepting Bitcoin. And all of those entities can be regulated. Centbee is also regulated. We have to submit suspicious transaction reports and all that sort of thing. And so if people want to use Bitcoin, it's not just going to be these hodlers with their cold storage wallets on their thumb drives and transacting in a cypherpunk way. If Bitcoin is going to be really useful to us, it has to be useful to everybody, the man in the street. And so Ammous just cannot see that. He thinks that this is now government-resistant money. And of course, Bitcoin wasn't created to be government-resistant money.
He puts it as if the government is like inhibiting innovation.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like these guys are blocking us from progressing, and that is not the case.
He thinks that this is a beautiful creation, it's improving people's lives, and innovation is growing around this, and there's a world of possibilities, but government can't handle all this innovation and benefit to mankind because it steps on their domain. He talks about decentralization. This is the most important thing. It's almost like a core theme that runs through this book is that this is so dangerous to government that the decentralization that is incorporated into the system is meant to stop them from meddling with it. What he's trying to show is that, well, even if governments wanted to regulate it, they can't. But then, of course, he goes on and says when people are using it on a day-to-day basis and they are finding value in it and it's improving people's lives, well, then maybe the government will soften its stance and allow this innovation to continue. That's his answer when it comes to the regulatory issues, is that too bad, too sad, governments can't do a thing about it. But of course, one thing we can definitely see around the world is how businesses like exchanges and wallets and merchants and all that sort of thing are becoming regulated.
Doesn't make sense, Mr. Chi, because all of these guys that push this anti-government idea or being decentralized away from the system, it's funny, like they are all businessmen running business in regulated spaces.
Yes, you mean like the BlackRock and all that?
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, they are like, they are proper institutions. It's not like some fly-by-night business where rules don't matter.
That's why they had to wait for the ACC in America to allow ETFs to be created. So there you can see how these businesses understand that. And until things are regulated, they're not really wanting to get involved there. And these people, even guys like Michael Saylor, they don't actually understand Bitcoin. They see an opportunity there. And with these ETFs, they see an opportunity to make money. People are trading these things, so there's an opportunity. Everybody sees an opportunity, and everyone's trying to jump on that train and make as much money as they can until there are very definite rules around what can and can't be done. But at the end of the day, the way Ammous is talking about Bitcoin being this uncensorable kind of system, this payment system, you can be sure that governments are going to be very upset about people being able to just send value around the world, send money to whomever they like without any controls. This is something that is going to be clamped down. And no amount of decentralization is going to stop that.
That's us talking about miners because they are the ones basically that run the entire system.
Exactly. And those are the ones, that's where the regulation happens. This idea of proof of work, this energy that is spent to process this little hash puzzle, that is what forces these entities, these miners, to become large enough so that they become accountable to law enforcement and have to abide by the regulations.
Definitely.
So Satoshi Nakamoto didn't create a system that was unstoppable. Decentralization was not there to be something that meant that Bitcoin was unstoppable. It was there to, of course, create a resilient network. It was there to allow peer-to-peer exchange, and also not having a single entity that is managing and running the whole system. It's broken up into many entities, all of them competing with each other to earn fees. And of course, in the process, becoming large accountable institutions that can be regulated. So Satoshi Nakamoto considered regulation from the outset. But he didn't want an anonymous system. He wanted a system that was pseudonymous, that you could see transactions and you could link transactions to identities, but were private on the blockchain.
Mr. G, this is a public ledger, yo.
A public ledger, but yet you can be private. But if now government wants to find out, what are you doing? Show me your transactions. You can then go to the blockchain and say, look, these are mine. Check it out. They can do all the tracing, and they can also trust that whatever's written to the blockchain is the truth.
It's sad, Mr. G. Breaks my heart, like how these guys like just took certain terms and twisted them like to their own narrative. Because like I'm always saying, in terms of decentralization, you know, we've always mentioned that it's about entities that are visible, that can be accountable for any illicit activity that's found on the chain.
That's right. That really what it boils down to when it comes to guys like Ammous and talking about a Bitcoin standard is this idea that what we all feel, that currencies are being inflated. And when you understand the source of that inflation, it's not the businessman raising prices, it's actually the government and banks creating more currency and devaluing that currency or debasing it. You know, a lot of people feel that. And everybody's looking for a way out of that.
Definitely,
And there's a lot of people who believe in this idea of a gold standard. People are looking at Bitcoin as a potential solution to that problem. And guys like Ammous are believing, they've drank this Kool-Aid, and they think, finally, we have it now. Because of that hope in a solution to this major problem we find in the world, people have suspended their judgment. Even somebody like Ammous, you know, he was smart enough, he wrote a book, you know, he understands Austrian economics and he understands the gold system. You know, he is looking for an alternative. And because of this BTC narrative that has been painted over the last 15 years of this decentralized system that is like gold, people have bought into this idea so much, and they want to believe that it's true.
They really want to.
In spite of all these basic problems that they have with their theory. They don't want to know about it. You know, if Mr. Ammous ever watches the Centbee show, he might actually get a heart attack. Because now he realizes that he's put his hopes into a mirage.
This was one of the earliest books to be released about Bitcoin. So for me, it was like one of those guys who, he was an opportunist at that point to jump on the bandwagon, to push a narrative that actually suits people like him.
Yes, it certainly hoodwinked a lot of people.
Take us back to us understanding the original vision, Satoshi's vision. And what was that?
Now if we want to talk about Bitcoin, you know, of course, Saifedean Ammous talks about BTC and how BTC can become a gold standard. You know, again, just drawing on this idea that Bitcoin is like gold, it's scarce and cannot be manipulated. You know, when Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, he wasn't thinking about digital gold. He wanted to create, I mean, it's in the title of the white paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
That was so ignored.
That was the whole point of Bitcoin. Of course, there are many other ways that you can use Bitcoin, but the predominant one was cash, and cash is not gold. Cash has very important aspects that makes it useful. One of the things is that it needs to be very low cost. And of course, BTC, high fees, dollars you're going to be spending. Bitcoin, the way it was devised was that it would be a tiny, tiny fee. Something that you wouldn't even notice.
Microtransactions.
Exactly. So you could go and buy something of very low value, a box of matches, and you wouldn't pay a large fee on that. That is how Satoshi envisioned it. It's cash. It's like you got a couple bucks in your pocket. You want to go and buy a stick of gum. You go and you spend that.
And I like how it doesn't undermine like single penny. you know, it brings back like true value to money, because if we can literally, you know, spend cents, that really brings true value to cash like it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you can make tiny value, low value payments for things, it's not just in person. Maybe you want to pay for something online. Maybe
Articles,
exactly.
whatever.
You want to spend a couple cents on something. That's what Bitcoin provided, especially when you look at online. The way that people spend online today is they use a credit card. And a credit card has a problem because money is being pulled out of your account. And when that happens online, you know, the person who's a credit carded is, they can have a dispute. They can say, look, that wasn't me pulling the money out of that credit card.
Easily so.
That
Yeah.
was fraud.
Yeah.
So I want my money back. And so, you know, we have to pay all these high fees when we make credit card transactions to cover the cost of the fraud that takes place.
It's insurance, basically.
And also, you can't pay for 1 or 2 cents with a credit card. You know, there's minimums that you can spend on. And so Bitcoin is just the perfect solution for that. If you want to spend cash online, instead of having a credit card payment, if you want a push payment instead of a pull payment, one that is final. If I send you the cash, it's there, it's in your pocket. It's not later on I can say, sorry, I didn't send that, and the transaction is nulled. This is what Bitcoin was for.
Yeah.
For small, low value transactions, even micro payments, nano payments. You know, you can create a system like an Internet of Things system, and there's payments going on, maybe fractions of a cent that gets paid many times. That's what Bitcoin was for.
Yeah.
It was meant to be also peer-to-peer. Most importantly, there is no central intermediary.
Yeah, I guess also that's what's been ignored in terms of pushing the BTC narrative, because like you were saying, the title of the white paper mentions peer-to-peer, electronic cash. It's as clear as daylight.
That's it. It's right there. And so peer-to-peer, that's what makes it so cheap. I don't have to go through a third party to pay you.
Yeah.
I can just pay you directly.
And also the offline payments. You know, I could be offline but still get paid.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was the idea of what's called SPV, or simple payment verification. And this is what Satoshi invented. The ability for me to make a digital payment to you where we're not connected to the internet, and you can still trust the payment based on a small amount of information. They call it the block headers and things like that. You can go and verify that the money I'm sending to you hasn't been already spent. So this was the original vision of Bitcoin. It was where just you want to make casual, small, low-value transactions, many of them. It costs very little. It can be done in a peer-to-peer way. And also, you can own the cash. It's not that the money is sitting in somewhere in someone else's money box. I've got the money and I can send it to you immediately. I don't have to ask permission from anybody else.
Yeah.
So it acts just like digital cash. That is what Bitcoin was meant to be. Of course, there are many other use cases now, but fundamentally low value cash. Nothing to do with gold and nothing to do with store value.
Guys, you heard it straight from Mr. Gio. Remember to subscribe, comment, show some love. Yeah. Also plug your friends. We're also available on Rumble, Spotify. Yeah. Just show love, comment, subscribe. Yeah. More money on fire. Yeah, Mr. You know, when we're talking BTC, we also have to mention Lightning. But that sort of takes away from the original protocol, because now the miners are affected.
Yes.
Transactions are no longer on the original chain.
This is what Ammous suggested in terms of the high fees, you know, having a system that can scale. And this is, of course, what everybody in BTC is pinning their hopes on, that the Lightning Network is going to solve the scalability issue.
The lightning that never struck.
Yes, where you can have your gold and you can have your low-cost transactions. This is what they are trying to achieve. And they think that if they can get this right, then, of course, what's the point of BSV? Because now you've got your digital gold, your decentralization, your small blocks, and all that kind of stuff. And now you've got Lightning. Now, the irony there is that Lightning will kill Bitcoin, because if you are moving your transactions away from the network, that means there are no fees being generated on that network.
Jeez.
All the fees are going to go into Lightning.
Yeah.
And also, if you think about these ETFs and other things like wrapped Bitcoin, in other words, people are now, because of the fees being so high on BTC, what they're saying is, all right, I'll give you an Ethereum token that represents your Bitcoin. And then when you want to transact with your Bitcoin, instead of actually transacting on the Bitcoin blockchain,
You transact on the Ethereum network.
that's right, you transact on the Ethereum network, and that's low cost and cheap. And I can send you my wrapped Bitcoin token, and I can say, oh, you want a Bitcoin, KG? Here's my Ethereum token representing that Bitcoin. The Bitcoin hasn't moved on the blockchain, but this other token has now been transferred. And so this issue now is that all that's going to happen is that you're going to move all the fees away from the network, from the Bitcoin network.
We might as well kill BTC if that's the case, because if there's no form of utility or activity there, there's no point of having it.
If no one's using it, no one's transacting, the people who are behind BTC are slowly driving it off a cliff. If Lightning ever works, then what's going to happen is it's going to destroy BTC, because then everybody's going to stop using BTC and they're going to just stick on Lightning. And of course, with Lightning now, we're moving right back into that centralized system.
It's centralized.
Because Lightning also has watchtowers and central entities. If I want to make a payment to you on Lightning, the whole idea is that there's, I'll pay somebody else, they'll pay somebody else until they pay you. But if there's no path all the way through to you, I'm going to have to go to some big centralized entity that has a lot of Bitcoin and a lot of connections to everybody. The fact that the Lightning Network, the way the network is structured, is that you have to find a path through the network. So what happens is that if I want to make a payment on the Lightning Network, what I have to do is I first have to fund what's called a channel.
Yes.
All right. Now, let's just say, for example, I want to send you one Bitcoin. So I now put my Bitcoin there on the Lightning Network, and I say, I want to pay KG. But you and I aren't connected directly.
Yeah.
So what I have to do is I have to find somebody who I'm connected to, who then is connected to you. So then what I can do is I can send the Bitcoin to that person, and they can send one of their Bitcoins through to you. You see?
So they must have Bitcoin, like you must.
That's right. Yeah. So I've got to find a path through this network where if I'm sending one Bitcoin, I have to find a person that's got a Bitcoin so that they can send their Bitcoin to somebody else, who can send it to somebody else, who can send it to you.
But how do you know that the person that you're sending through has Bitcoin?
That's the whole idea of Lightning, is that now the Lightning Network is trying to find a path through networks. If Lorien is trying to pay KG, the Lightning Network is trying to find who has enough Bitcoin all the way through.
It's so complicated, Mr. G.
Super complicated, as well as super mathematically impossible. We talk about NP hard, but I think we've covered that once before. So a computer science problem that hasn't been solved yet.
It can't be solved.
Yes. But now what's happened is that this network has to find a path or a route through this network. And so essentially what's now happening is that the BTC network, there is no transaction going on. All the transactions are happening on this network. Now, going back to the path, let's just say, for example, there is no path all the way through to you, because I can't find a person who's connected to a person who's connected to you.
Because I was wondering, I'm like, okay, cool. If that is the case, it's not always going to be a point where there is someone who's connected to the third person I want to send to.
Exactly. That's what happens a lot. And so what's happening in Lightning now is that these centralized entities are forming, which say, don't worry, we will have lots of Bitcoin and we will have lots of people connected to us. And so if Lorien wants to pay KG, easy. Lorien connects to this entity and the entity will connect to KG. And so now I'm routing all my payments through that entity.
How is it different from a bank?
That's it. That's the argument. Everybody talks about decentralization. All that Lightning is doing is it's just centralizing everything again. This whole problem that they have, which is we've got high fees. We want to keep secure. We want to keep small blocks because small blocks means decentralization. It means that everybody can have a non-mining node. And again, that does nothing. A non-mining node literally does nothing. So that's the false idea of decentralization that they have in their minds, completely false. So they're saying, look, okay, we want to keep Bitcoin the way it is, BTC, 1 megabyte blocks, small number of transactions per second, high fees. You go and use Lightning Network if you want low fees. Move all the fees off the Bitcoin network onto Lightning, onto the centralized system, and then we've got our cake and we can eat it too. And so this is the whole idea of the economic model being undermined, where the solution to the high fees is to actually stop using the network. You say it all the time. The best way to use BTC is to not use it.
Straight up.
And this is what these alternative solutions are.
There is no utility in BTC. There's no innovation. For the fact that Lightning hasn't struck, It's been how many years? It's still in conversation.
The problem with BTC, they are trying to find alternative ways to use BTC.
Yeah.
They're talking about these wrapped Bitcoins, these tokenized Bitcoins on other chains. They're talking about Lightning Network. They're even saying, well, buy ETFs. Anything that will move activity away from the BTC blockchain.
Yeah.
And in doing so, what they are doing is undermining the whole economic model that miners need. They need fees on the blockchain.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're just going to stop mining.
BlackRock was even better off just, mining BSV than actually.
Now you don't even need to actually hold your Bitcoin BTC. You can just go and hold an ETF from BlackRock. So this is the issue. Moving economic activity away from BTC means that BTC eventually is just going to die because no miners can make any money. And so they're just going to stop mining.
This sounds like, messed up system in a sense, because if it takes away like all the activity from the original chain, that's I don't know, Dracula vibes.
Yes, sucking the lifeblood.
We all know that Bitcoin, it was meant to be peer-to-peer cash. But now if there's no activity or any form of transactions happening there, definitely all these other chains are sucking the life out of it.
Any activity that happens off-chain means that is not going to be income earned by the miners. And so the miners are going to be completely disincentivized to operate and to mine that network. And so that's the idea of the vampire attack, where all these alternative ways of using BTC, the ETFs, the wrapped Bitcoins and all that, and having Bitcoin on an exchange, so you don't have to transact with it. You can just go and speculate on that exchange. That is all sucking the lifeblood out of the blockchain.
It really is. And
basically going to destroy it.
Yeah, but I can't wait to see the day but BTC is destroyed, yo.
Don't be nasty there, Kage.
There's a lot of people who are being misled, and this is why we're here as the Centbee Show. So remember to subscribe, comment, show some love, yeah. So yeah, Ms. G, if we're gonna be talking about storing your Bitcoin, isn't it like better to have it like on your wallet versus in these entities?
Yes, because if you think about it, if you have money in a bank, it's not your money anymore. You've deposited money and you think your money's been put in a box and with your name on it and they don't touch it. But when you put money into a bank, it becomes the bank's money.
Yep.
And if anything happens to the bank, that's their money and they're going to do with it whatever they can and need to. And hopefully you'll be made whole at some point. But that's not always the case. And the same thing is with your Bitcoin. If you're buying a Bitcoin ETF or you are storing your Bitcoin on an exchange, that money's not in your hands anymore. And now there's a risk because, we've seen exchanges collapse. Look at FTX and there have been many, famously Mt. Gox back in the early days. People had all their Bitcoin on these exchanges and then what happened? There was a hack. Maybe the founders got arrested or the founder died. That's actually literally happened. And he died with the keys, so people lost their Bitcoin. I think it was Quadriga X. If you're going to be keeping your Bitcoin at a third party, the whole point of Bitcoin was to get rid of these third parties. Why have these centralized entities holding and managing your funds and then creating another risk as well as creating more fees and more costs to you? So this just moves again away completely from the idea of Bitcoin, where Bitcoin was meant to be held by a user, just like cash is in your pocket. It's your cash. And you don't have to go through a third party to transact. If you are storing your Bitcoin somewhere and there's a custodian, you are now exposed to the risk of that custodian either running off with your money, going bust, a whole lot of issues.
There's a lot that could happen there.
Your blockchain might be decentralized, but your ecosystem is centralized. Huge irony there.
Now people get it why Centbee is a non-custodial wallet.
Yes, Centbee is a non-custodial wallet. So when you have Centbee, you've got your 12 words and your PIN. Those are used to generate your private keys on your wallet. Centbee doesn't have that information. We don't keep that information. But it also means that now with great power comes great responsibility. And so you've got to look after that information. If you go and lose your 12 words and your 4-digit PIN, we don't have it. We can't control your money. We don't have any access to it.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
This is the idea of cash. If you've got cash in your wallet and you lose your wallet, you're going to lose your cash. The bank can't help you. Same thing with Centbee. So look after your 12 words, look after your 4-digit PIN. because without those, Centbee can't help you, but the power is in your hands. Centbee isn't like a bank. When you have Bitcoin on Centbee, we're not keeping it in a vault. We've got no access to it. We can't touch it. Hopefully give you some confidence when you're using Centbee wallet.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, Ms. G, I mean, that was a nice sort of like insightful session, like covering the book from Mr. Ammous. Ammous. Mr. Ammous.
I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, Mr. Ammous.
A mouse. Are you a man or a mouse? Be a man, Saifedean. Don't be a mouse.
We're not clipping this out, yo. We keeping that. Anyway, yeah, Ms. G. I'm just glad that we had touched base on the book, because I think it's one of the best-selling books in the space, actually.
It's definitely influenced a lot of people. So yeah, I think it was quite important for us to actually talk about it, and I like the fact that we have clarified sort of certain misconceptions. Bitcoin can never be gold, and that's quite clear. Look, it's definitely a valuable commodity.
Def.
And, when it comes to money, there needs to be value there.
I think I need to stand corrected. I meant BTC.
Yes, that's right. BTC ain't gold.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It's digital fool's gold.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about BTC, I'm going to recommend the person who understands BTC more than anybody else in the entire world, and that is Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff, he's an Austrian economist, and he's the biggest Bitcoin bear there is, but that's just because he doesn't understand Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But he rightfully understands BTC and calls everybody out, who think that this is digital gold.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, Saifedean, you are beating down the wrong track. You found something beautiful, you found Bitcoin, but unfortunately you've lost the plot.
Yeah.
You've lost the mission.
Yeah.
And lost the message, and unfortunately are preaching a false message there. There's unanswered questions in your book. You've addressed some of them, but you haven't addressed them sufficiently. There's cracks in this theory that Bitcoin, BTC can become a new gold standard. And if only you could just find the real Bitcoin and see the real value that Satoshi Nakamoto created in a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, one that was regulatory friendly, one that was extremely useful, that had extremely low fees. This is what Bitcoin is meant to be.
Straight up.
And this is the Bitcoin SV, the Satoshi Vision Protocol. That is what's going to transform the world in wonderful ways that we can still hardly imagine. And so, Saifedean, I highly recommend you go and dig a little bit deeper and find out what was Satoshi talking about, and maybe you'll discover BSV and stop being so idealistic,
Yeah.
Saifedean. See what what he's been talking about. Go and read the white paper, maybe. Yeah, so this was a cool little excursion into the Bitcoin standard by Saifedean Ammous. He talks about BTC being this new digital gold standard, and unfortunately he misses a few important things about this new standard that he's talking about. One of the most important things is that your standard needs to have a standard of value, and BTC has none. And all your solutions for making BTC a little bit more useful, all that you're doing is you're undermining BTC by shifting transactions away from the blockchain network. If you really want real value, and you want real truth, and you want a future, then there's only one protocol, and that's Satoshi's protocol, the BSV protocol.
Straight up.
Cage?
Mr. G, I'm about to step into this week's socials. First one comes from Circus Road, and he's saying, hello again, Mr. G and K-Star, shining the Bitcoin light. We really appreciate the show, guys. It's good to hear of a time when Bitcoin was actually used. I dream of those days for us again. Spending sats. I was just wondering if you experience any of the problems that Vinny spoke about of BSV in your use of Bitcoin in your daily life.
So thanks, Circus Road. Thanks for coming back and leaving that great question there. That's right. So last week we had a discussion with Vinny Lingham, who's a very well-known Bitcoin crypto person from the old days, contrarian, known as the Oracle of Bitcoin. And we were talking about BSV to him. And now, of course, he's not a BSV believer. He thinks that there's a lot of problems there that Circus Road is referring to. And one of the issues he said is that BSV has these long confirmation times. He said that if you want to move BSV to an exchange, you're going to wait 50, 60, 100 confirmations. And that's true. But that's not because of BSV. That's because of the exchanges.
I wanted to say that, Mr. G. Thanks, yo.
Yeah. The only reason why BSV has these is because the exchanges are requiring this number of confirmations. And a confirmation really is how many blocks have been created since your transaction. He says that this is just making BSV unusable. That's because you're trying to use BSV on an exchange. That's not the way BSV is meant to be used. And also that is an arbitrary limit that the exchanges are placing on BSV. The reality is that BSV is trustworthy after zero confirmations.
Zero, Mr. G.
But this is the thing. The way Bitcoin was meant to be is that if a transaction is valid and it gets added to the Bitcoin mempool, which is the waiting area where miners are collecting their transactions to put into blocks, that transaction, if it is a valid transaction, in other words, it hasn't been already spent, the miners are going to include it, even if it has an extremely low fee on that transaction. Because the Bitcoin block sizes are not restricted. Well, at the moment they are. They have a limit, but that's a massive limit. Of course, ultimate configuration for Bitcoin eventually is to have no block size, where you can have a gigabyte or a terabyte. Actually, you already have gigabyte blocks. You can have a petabyte block. Why not? The problem that Vinny raised is with these large confirmations is not actually how Bitcoin BSV works. It's just an arbitrary limit that has been placed on BSV by these exchanges. So don't use exchanges. That's not what BSV is for. It's meant to be for cash. It's not meant to be for speculating. It's meant to be used in enterprises for smart contracts and all these cool things. And zero confirmations. That's all you need. Unless you're wanting to go and speculate on BSV, I don't think that particular issue is even an issue.
It's not.
It is an issue if you want to speculate, but it's not an issue if you want to actually use BSV. But anyway, thanks, Circus Road. Thanks for that great question. BSV, zero confirmations. That's all you need. It's an instant payment system. That's what cash is about, not where you wait an hour to get your money. No, you need your money instantly.
Straight up.
And of course, for low value casual transactions, the standard transactions, zero confirmations is all you need.
That's all, Ms. G. Thanks, Circus Road. Our second one comes from Keith. Real optimistic. He's saying, great episode. Appreciated hearing from a non-BSVer. That wasn't totally dismissive of BSV. In my opinion, the criticisms were legit. Adoption is key.
Yes, okay, again, that's our Vinny Lingham episode. Please go watch it. It's episode 54. It just happened previous to this one. Vinny is not a BSVer. He's somebody who's outside of that little click. So Vinny's not a BSVer, and he gives his perspective on BSV as well as the other Bitcoin fork, Bitcoin Cash. So check out that episode if you just want to hear his opinion. And I thought it was a very cool conversation.
Very cool.
It was nice to hear the other side for a bit.
Yeah, and I also appreciate the fact that he seems like an honest guy who puts his opinions straight up as they are. No filter.
No filter. He's not afraid to speak his mind.
Sure. Thanks for that, Keith. Our last one comes from 12Ds, sub-Ds. This is deeper. Hey, guys, always look forward to your show.
Thanks, Ds. Thanks for the comment. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching.
Sure. Ms. G, I think we've come to the end of our show.
Great stuff. Cool, Kage. We were just talking about The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, a book that's highly influential. A lot of people are reading this book, it seems, and buying its premise. But of course, when Saifedean is talking about Bitcoin, he's not talking about Bitcoin, he's talking about BTC, which is an alternative version of Bitcoin. It's changed from how Satoshi Nakamoto created it. And of course, he wants people to think that BTC, being something that is never used, is just stuck in a vault, is going to add all sorts of value to people's lives. So thanks, Saif. Try again, though. Get your second version out as soon as possible and speak about the real Bitcoin, and maybe we'll be able to impact the world in a positive way instead of just dragging us down the wrong path. Shame on you. Anyway, Kage, I want to thank you, Kage. Thanks for this chat.
Thanks, Ms. G.
And we want to thank you guys for joining us and for your comments. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you again in the next one. Thanks for joining us.
Please come back soon.
Please come back soon.